Hey guys, this is Nick coming at you with a brand new deck profile for the channel for the first time. This is a version of Egyptian god Numeron that me and a very close friend of mine decided to put together. He recently came to me and decided that he wanted to get back into the game a little bit more seriously. He was a huge fan of the original anime, especially the DM era, and some of his favorite cards happened to be the Egyptian gods. And when he heard that they were making some new support for them, he came to me and, he asked me if I would help him build a deck based around the gods. And, I told him absolutely. I was super excited to do it. And this is finally what we decided would be our version of the deck. And what we decided would also be the most consistent, yet fun, as well as somewhat competitive. Because this deck actually can body some of the top decks of the format right now. So let's go ahead and dive right in. As usual, we'll start with the main deck, and we'll start with our monster lineup. So, the problem with the Egyptian gods is that it's extremely hard to get 3 bodies on board to facilitate the tribute summon. And we felt that the best way to do that, after doing a lot of research, we decided that the Numerons happened to be the best engine to help facilitate that. Given that the Numeron package could throw out 4 monsters on the field that could be used as a tribute fodder to summon one of the Egyptian gods. And because you have a lot of options with draw power playing the Numeron engine, we decided that Slifer was going to be the Egyptian god that we focused the most on. And it's kind of ironic because Slifer happens to be the Egyptian god that I would say is the most relevant to this day. His effect has aged the best compared to Winged Dragon of Ra's effect and Obelisk the Tormentor's effect. And that effect is basically a floodgate, where while Slifer is on field, if your opponent normal or special summons a monster, that monster immediately loses 2,000 attack. And if it does, the monster gets, and its attack was reduced to 0 as a result, it gets destroyed immediately. Now that is not once per turn, that is just a continuous effect that Slifer has while he's on the field. And it only applies to monsters that are summoned in attack position. So what's cool about this is this pretty much stops any normal summon that your opponent's going to throw your way, in addition to stopping pretty much almost a lot of different link plays, because a lot of your link 1s, link 2s, and even some link 3s aren't going to have enough attack to be able to withstand the effect that Slifer has. So the moment your opponent commits any monsters to the board, they're instantly losing 2,000 attack, and if their attack was reduced to 0 as a result, they get destroyed immediately. So as a result, Slifer happens to be the best monster, compared to Winged Dragon of Ra or Obelisk, and he gains 1,000 attack for each attack and defense for every card in your hand. And since the Numeron engine can help facilitate lots of draw power, we decided that Slifer was going to be the best choice and the best god to focus on for this strategy. So 3 copies of Slifer the Sky Dragon. We are, however, playing the 1 Obelisk the Tormentor. Obelisk, in my opinion, would be the second best Egyptian god, given that he's the only Egyptian god that has the self-protection effect, in the fact that he can't be targeted by card effects of any kind. So, and the fact that he also has a base attack of 4,000, he's pretty much your most reliable of the gods in terms of just having a base attack stat, and having the self-protection is nice, because you have to admit that sometimes Slifer, when you summon him, he won't have as much attack as Obelisk, depending on the game state. So sometimes Obelisk is just that, old reliable beater that you've got to put down on the field. And the fact that he cannot be targeted is really nice as well. So 1 copy of Obelisk the Tormentor. Then, for our Numeron engine, we are playing 3 copies of Numeron Wall. Numeron Wall is absolutely insane. It basically additional copies of your field spell, Numeron Network, given that he can discard himself from your hand to the graveyard to activate a Numeron Network directly from your deck. That's awesome, because that interaction cannot be stopped by cards like Ash Blossom. Since you're not actually adding the card to hand, you're just activating it straight from deck. It's a really cool interaction. There's very few cards that can actually stop that kind of play. So he helps get to your field spell, and in addition to that, his secondary effect kind of functions like a battle fader, where if you would take damage, you can special summon the Numeron Wall from your hand, and then just end the battle phase immediately. So if your opponent's trying to OTK you and push your game, Numeron Wall can really save your life in a pinch. So 3 copies of that. Then we are playing the 1 copy of Reactor Slime. We play the 1 because you really don't want to see this card all that much. Realistically, all that we use it for is for the secondary effect to fetch our copy of Metal Reflect Slime, and that's about all we use it for. So it's kind of like a second copy of Metal Reflect Slime, in that regard. We rarely use the first effect of this card because it has a lot of restrictions put behind it, but one copy is really all you need for the setup, and so far through testing it's played out really, really well. Then we are on the one copy of Dinowrestler Pankratops, and that's because this deck is designed to go second and try and OTK your opponent as quickly as possible, and we felt that Dinowrestler Pankratops happens to be the best card to help facilitate that. Before you commit to your Numeron Network play, you can just special summon Pankratops from your hand if your opponent controls more monsters than you do, and as a quick effect, he can tribute himself to pop any card on the field. That's a really strong effect. You can go after back row, you can go after monsters, try and bait out negations, whatever you want to do. Pankratops is there and he's ready no matter what. So one copy of this card. It's a shame that it is limited, but at the same time I do understand, because if this card was still at 3, it would be pretty broken. But moving on, we are playing 3 copies of Lava Golem. Like I said, we're really trying to go hard and go second. We're not playing around. Whatever board your opponent makes, high five to him. Fantastic. Take a Lava Golem. We're activating network and we're OTKing you through this golem, no matter what. And if we don't OTK you, you're taking 1,000 burn on the next standby. And if that doesn't kill you, well, you have to wait for the rest of the profile, but we're still playing a lot of other stuff that can help you push through different kinds of boards. Because the funny thing about this deck is, even though it's built to be an OTK deck, sometimes you can't always OTK, in which case you kind of have to be prepared for the grind. And this deck does have that locked down pretty well, actually. I really feel that this version of the deck has been the most consistent. I've seen a lot of different builds of Numeron Egyptian gods, and I'm going to be honest, man, I've had to scratch my head at some of the choices that people have went with, because some of it just doesn't make any kind of sense. But 3 copies of Lava Golem, it's basically like a cracked out version of a kaiju, being able to just tribute 2 monsters your opponent controls. You give them the golem. It does have the restriction where you can't normal summon or set the turn you summon the Lava Golem, but that's no problem, because you can still consolidate your Numerons into a link play and then still be able to maintain a pretty good board and a good game state. So 3 Lava Golems are all you need. And then moving on to our hand trap lineup, this is actually going to probably catch a lot of people off guard. And this is a really cool tech choice that me and my buddy decided to test out, and so far it's been working extremely well. We are on 3 copies of Ghost Sister and Spooky Dogwood. Now I know what you're probably going to say, that this hand trap is probably the worst out of all the Ghost Girls. And to some extent, yes, you are correct. However, I do have to point out that people do not respect this card at all. Every single deck in the meta right now is special summoning like crazy. If you activated Ghost Sister and Spooky Dogwood, I like to call it the Ghost Sister Challenge. And that's because if your opponent decides to continue playing and making their board, they're going to give you a bunch of life points. Like you're in testing, there's been games where I've ended on over 30,000 life points by the time the opponent finished making their board. That is ridiculous. Or if they are afraid of this card and afraid of the points you're going to gain, they're going to combo half-assly and end up on a subpar board, which you'll still be able to crack through very easily since you're playing a pure go second version. But Ghost Sister and Spooky Dogwood has put in so much work. Her effect to discard herself, and for the rest of the turn, for the main phase and battle phase, if your opponent special summons a monster, you just gain the attack that monster has to your life. That is absolutely ridiculous. Because the goal of this deck ultimately is to get to network. That way you have your way to facilitate your link plays, and also an easy way to get your Egyptian god summons off, since they do require 3 tributes. Sometimes you can't always get to your win con, and Ghost Sister and Spooky Dogwood is designed to help prolong that. She'll give you the life points that you need to maintain a longer game state. That way your opponent just doesn't OTK you the following turn. So through testing, I found that Ghost Sister and Spooky Dogwood has been really, really great. I have no regrets playing this card, and to be honest, a lot of people just don't respect it. Like, I've activated this, and they keep comboing off, and I've gained so many points to the point where it's literally won me games just off the amount of life that I've gained off Ghost Sister. And maybe it's because, like I said, people don't play this card and they don't respect it, but it is something that you should possibly look into if you're playing like a slower, more control-focused deck, or even if you're trying to play like an OTK deck. But if you can't access your OTK going second because, you know, you bricked or you drew an awkward hand, this card is designed to help get you there. And always having more life in Yu-Gi-Oh! Does matter. I know some people say that life points in the game don't matter, and to an extent they don't, but sometimes they do. And like I said, this card has made a huge impact, and so far, both me and my friend have been really happy with it. So, 3 copies of that. And then for the last main deck monster and the last hand trap we're playing, we are on 3 copies of PSY-Frame Gamma and the 1 driver, obviously. PSY-Framegear Gamma is really cool in this deck, and almost every single Egyptian god profile that I've watched, no one's playing this card. And to be honest, I really don't understand why. Because if you're building a deck that's purpose-built to go second, you have to understand that the moment you activate Numeron Network, your opponent knows what you're up to, and they will do what they can to stop this card at all costs. So if they have some form of negation on their side of the field in the form of a monster, let's take Borreled Savage Dragon, for example, because that's a pretty common card most people end on. You bet your top dollar that Savage Dragon will most likely try to negate the activation of Network, or if they don't negate the activation of Network, they'll try and negate the effect of Network. And when that happens, since you control no monsters, you can literally Gamma them to ensure that your Network does resolve. You negate whatever card they try to use against you, destroy that card, and then you can just Synchro Gamma and Driver into an Omega and rip another card out of their hand. And what's cool about that interaction is that Omega happens to clear itself off of your field by banishing itself and a random card out of the opponent's hand, making it so that your Network is live, since the cost or the restriction is that you have to control no monsters to be able to use the effect. And you can just punish your opponent so hard through an interaction like that. So Gamma is just a really nice hand trap. Even if you're going second and your opponent's going first and they summon something or activate an effect that is really gonna like hurt you or give you a hard time, then just Gamma the card. It doesn't matter because Gamma doesn't interrupt Numeron Network, because at the end phase, both the Gamma and Driver get banished anyway. So when it comes around to your turn, you're not gonna have monsters on your fields. You'll be able to resolve the Network regardless. So to be honest, I really don't understand why people aren't playing Gamma in a deck like this. But they should be. And like I said, in testing, it's really done a lot of work, and I'm really, really happy with the monster lineup that we have in this deck so far. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the spells. Obviously, we are playing Egyptian God Numeron, so we are playing the 3 copies of Numeron Network. This is one of the most insane field spells I think I've read in a long time. And mind you, I do play FA. So that deck has like 4 field spells in theme. This one field spell alone trumps all 4 of those. This card's ridiculous. Being able to just dump a normal spell card that meets its activation conditions from your deck to grave as cost. So your opponent, even if they had a response to this, you still get to dump the spell. And then just special summon all of your Numeron Exceeses for free. There's literally like no cost to this whatsoever. And you just put free bodies on board that you can use for link plays, tribute fodder, whatever you wish. Like, this card is nuts. And it also gives the bonus effect of allowing your Numeron monsters to trigger their effects without detaching materials, which is really, really cool. So 3 copies of Network. Like I said, this deck is purpose-built to see Network as often as it can. Remember, you are playing 3 Numeron Walls and you're playing 3 Networks, so you're basically playing 6 copies of the field spell. So there's a pretty good chance you're going to see it, whether you're going first or second. And speaking of going first, this deck, even though it's designed to go second, can go first. Make no mistake, it can go first if it has to. And we'll explain some of the cards that I'm running for that throughout the profile as well as in the side. Next up is 2 copies of Mound of the Bound Creator. This is another field spell that has me scratching my head because almost every single god deck profile that I've seen that had to do with Numerons or any other archetype, there's so many people that are not playing this field spell. And I'm sitting here wondering why. There's literally no drawback to not want to play this card, other than the fact that some people might say it's a brick. But even then, that's still negligible, because like, you could set rotation this, you could terraforming it, you could metaverse the thing. Like, you have to understand that the Egyptian gods don't have inherent protection other than Obelisk. And even then, Obelisk can still be destroyed by effects that don't target. Mound of the Bound Creator protects all level 10 or higher monsters from targeting and from destruction by card effects, even if those destruction by effects are your own. So you could literally dark hole the field while you have a Slifer out with Mound of the Bound, and everything but your Slifer will get nuked, which is insane. Like this card, the protection that it offers for the gods makes them really difficult to get around, and in addition to that, if a level 10 or higher monster battles an opponent's monster and sends it to the grave, the player who controls that monster that was sent to the graveyard takes 1000 damage. So even if your opponent tries to wall up and put like a bunch of cards in defense to prevent you from OTKing them, they're still taking the burn. Every single time you destroy a monster and send it to grave, they take 1000 damage. It's insane. And on top of all that, if your opponent deals with the Mound of the Bound of the Creator, they destroy it by a card effect, you get to add a Divine Beast from deck to hand. So like this card is really, really awesome, and to be honest with you, I really don't understand why more people aren't playing this. Like, it gives your gods protection, it helps you push for game by burning them for damage, and when it leaves the field, it lets you search for a Divine Beast, which is pretty much any god from deck to hand. Like, there's literally no reason why people shouldn't be playing this card, and like I said, I'm playing 2 copies of it, and it's one of my favorite field spells behind Network. Then, I know what a lot of people are going to say about this. We are playing the 1 Mystic Mine. Look, don't hate, it's just the 1 copy. This deck isn't Mystic Mine Turbo. Like, we're just playing the 1 copy. It's not designed to get to Mystic Mine as often as it can. It's one of those cards that if you draw it, you draw it. If you don't, you don't. You don't rely on it to win, but when you see it, sometimes it helps. And that's why we're playing it. It's still a card that I know a lot of people have animosity towards. But again, we're just playing it as a one-of in the deck because we had the slot available. And to be honest with you, it's a really good field spell to help you stall for game, because again, your ultimate win condition is to get to Network, or get to an Egyptian god and push for huge amounts of damage. And if you can't do that for whatever reason, mine pretty much slows the game down to a huge crawl until you can get there. So 1 copy of Mystic Mine. The funny thing is too, this card's been going up in price actually, but Mystic Mine can't be understated. Just being able to just shut your opponent's whole board down if they control more monsters than you do, preventing their monsters from activating the effects and attacking, is big, so you can't understate that. Then, moving into the quick play spells, or just the spells in general, excuse me, we are on 3 copies of Soul Crossing. This is some of the newer Egyptian God support that came out of the structure decks. I would like to say that this card is really, really cool. It's basically like a Monarch Stormforth, but for the Egyptian gods. It allows you to tribute during the main phase, immediately after the effect resolves. You tribute summon one Divine Beast monster, and then when you do, you can tribute a monster or monsters your opponent controls, even though you don't control them. What's nice about Soul Crossing is that you can wait till your opponent has 3 monsters on board and activate this on their turn, tribute all 3, summon a god to your field, or you can do like a combination of like 2 monsters from their field and 1 from yours, or 2 from yours and 1 from theirs. It doesn't have to be 3 from their side specifically. However, something you should know is that if you tribute any monster from their side of the field with this card's effect, you are locked out of activating. You can only activate 1 card or effect per turn until the end of the next turn, except the effect of a Divine Beast. So that's a small restriction, but to be honest, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter all that much. But 3 copies of Soul Crossing is really, really cool. Finally, this is something that I think the Egyptian gods needed for a really long time, and they finally have it. Then, obviously, because we're playing the Numeron engine, we're on 2 copy of Numeron Calling. This is the normal spell card you're going to be dumping off of the network to facilitate your Numeron combo. So 2 copies of Calling, obviously, is important. Something that you shouldn't understand about the card is that the restriction is that once you do resolve this card's effect, you can only normal or special summon 1 monster for the remainder of the turn. So that's something to keep in mind. Once you commit to the Numeron plays, you're only allotted 1 summon after that, whether it's normal or special. So keep that in mind. It's not a huge drawback. I mean, you can go into a link play or distribute 3 of the Numerons for a god, so it still works out in this deck. Then we're playing 2 copies of Memories of Hope because, again, Slifer's our main focus of this, and the more cards in your hand, the stronger Slifer is. So Memories of Hope allowing you to draw up to 4 cards, literally like a double pot of greed, is really, really dumb. This card is insane. It generates you so much advantage and really helps you just outgrind your opponent or push through whatever board they have to go for game. And then again, moving into the rest of the spells, this might be a little bit controversial for some people, but we're playing 2 copies of Mystical Space Typhoon in the main deck. I know what you're going to say. There's better removal spell traps out there. Yes, I am aware of that. However, two things to understand. Number one, if we're playing Cosmic Cyclone, that does require you to pay life points. In this deck, that's not always going to be something we want to do, given that we're playing Numerons, and most of the time you're going to be able to OTK through boards. You have to crash into stuff to do that and take damage on yourself. So I didn't want to be put into a situation where I Cosmic Cycloned a bunch of things, and I'm down 3k points, and now I can't OTK my opponent, because in order for me to do that, I have to crash my Numerons into monsters that are just too big, and I'm going to end up killing myself as a result. I don't want to be in that situation, and I still feel like Mystical Space Typhoon is a really good one-for-one trade against most back row. Either they're going to activate it because you're baiting it out early, or it's just going to destroy whatever you targeted, and you're still going plus anyway, or you break even. But Mystical Space Typhoon is also cool because we do play set rotation in this deck, and when you set rotation, you can give your opponent a Mound of the Bound to their side of the field, and you can MST the Mound of the Bound to trigger the Grave effect to search a god to your hand. So that is another reason why we choose to play the MST instead of the Cosmic Cyclone. But then I know you're also probably going to ask, well, why don't you play Twin Twisters? Simple answer. We don't like discarding cards. You want to keep cards in your hand to boost the attack of Slifer the Sky Dragon. Discarding cards isn't going to help you do that. So Twin Twister was out of the question. But so far, testing the 2 Mystical Space Typhoon in the main has worked out really, really well, and I have no regrets. So 2 of that. Then we are on 2 copies of Limiter Removal. I'm going to be honest, at first I thought this card was a bit win more, and it still is, don't get me wrong, but this card helps me win games that I shouldn't have won in the first place. Holy crap, even if your opponent controls no monsters, I can still OTK you with the Numerons as long as I have Limiter Removal, because they only gain attack when they battle monsters, so if there's no monsters to battle, the most damage you can normally do with Numerons is 4,000, 1,000 for each. With Limiter Removal, it doubles that to 2k. So 2 times 4 is 8. So that's literally an OTK right there on its own. So 2 copies of Limiter Removal. Also, this card is not once per turn. So you can Limiter Removal and then Limiter Removal again in the same battle phase to double the double, which is really silly. And you can push for so much damage, it's not even funny. Then we're on the 1 copy of Thunder Force Attack. This card, to be honest, it's cool. Don't get me wrong, it is really cool. Because it's spell speed 4, it can't be responded to, the activation can't be negated. That's great. Problem with this card is it's not searchable. So I felt that playing multiples was just kind of bad because this card only does something if Slifer's on field. And to get Slifer on board, you do have to jump through some hoops. And I just felt that this card at more than 1 copy was just going to brick you most of the time than it would help. But we do play the 1-of because obviously our main focus is Slifer. So he will be on the board a majority of the time, I would say. So if you draw into this card, it's just literally like a one-sided Raigeki Break. Or, I'm sorry, Lightning Vortex, I believe is the spell. Because it only destroys face-up monsters. And then if you did it during your main phase, you get to draw cards up to the number destroyed. So that's pretty cool. But then we are on the 1 copy of Set Rotation, because again, we want to get access to Network as soon as possible, or get access to Mound of the Bound, or Mystic Mine. But Set Rotation is really good to help grab us whatever field spell that we need. It's almost like a 2nd copy of Terraforming. Then, speaking of Terraforming, we are on the 1 copy of it. Obviously, we want to see Network as soon as we can, so we play the Terraforming to help us get there. Then we're on the 1 copy of Harpy Feathers Duster, because again, we're designed to go 2nd. We don't want to run into any back row, so we Duster it, and it usually takes care of the problem. So that was it for the spells. Now we're going to move into the trap cards, and the traps are actually really cool. We are playing some really cool spice, I think. We're running 2 copies of Jar of Avarice. Now, this is probably going to make you scratch your head. Let me explain the logic behind this, because a lot of people in the comments are probably going to be like, well, why don't you play Pot of Avarice? It's a better card. Look, let me explain this. So, the goal of this deck is Numerons, right? Most of the time, it's going to be your win con if the gods fail. So, Jar of Avarice is nice because you can set it. It's a trap, obviously, so you usually use it on your opponent's turn. Your opponent doesn't know what it is. So chances are they're going to try and destroy it or get rid of it or do whatever. When that happens, you can chain a response. Target 5 cards. Keep in mind, Pot of Avarice requires you to target 5 monsters. Jar of Avarice requires you to target 5 cards. So what this does is this recycles your entire Numeron package, because you target your 4 Numerons, number 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you target your Numeron Calling. You put the 4 Xyzes back in your extra deck, you put the 1 Calling back in your deck, shuffle it, and then you draw 1 card. It literally recycles your entire Numeron engine. So even though we're only playing double copies of all the Numerons and 2 copies of Calling, realistically, if the duel lasts long enough and we can resolve the 2 copies of Jar of Avarice, we can Numeron Network you up to 4 times in a single game. That is absolutely insane, and I feel this card is really underrated, because even if you're not going to target your Numerons to shuffle them back for whatever reason, you could target cards, anything, field spells. You want to recycle Harpy's Feather Duster? If that's in your graveyard, go right ahead, target that, put it back in your deck. This card is insane. Early on, we were testing with Reckless Greed, but I just didn't like the restriction that Reckless Greed put on you, making you skip your next 2 draw phases. So after doing some research, we felt that Jar of Avarice was just the overall better card. And in testing, this card has worked out really, really well for us. So 2 copies of that. And then for the last 2 cards in the main deck, we're playing the one Metaverse, which is basically Trap Terraforming. This is nice to work out in tandem with either Mound of the Bound or with Mystic Mine, being able to fetch you a field spell on your opponent's turn. And then for the last card in the main deck, we are on the one Metal Reflect Slime. Just 1 copy, because to be honest, we are playing the Egyptian God Slime in our extra, but that is not what our win condition is. Our win condition is the Egyptian Gods, and if that doesn't work, then we Numeron Network. So the 1 copy of Slime. And that rounds out the main deck. That is 44 cards in the main, so let's go ahead and jump right into the extra deck. We are on the 1 copy of number C1, Numeron Gate Sunya. Pretty much you would see some of this by using the number 1 Numeron Gate Ekam as material, and when it's succeed summoned, you banish all monsters on the field. Non-target, non-destruction. And then what's nice about this is during your next standby phase, the number C1 comes back, and if Numeron Network is still face up on the board, you burn your opponent for 1,000 damage times the number of banish succeeds. This card is really awesome to out-sketch boards, and the fact that it comes back and does a pretty good amount of burn damage is really nice as well. Then, of course, we are on the 1 copy of Egyptian God Slime. This card is really cool, and I've seen a lot of profiles where they're playing 2 or 3 of this. To be honest, you really don't need to play that much. Like, this card at 1 is perfectly fine. Again, it's not really your win con, and it's 1 copy is just good enough. Like, playing any more than that, you're just bricking slots in your extra deck, I feel. Like, you really don't need to max out on this card. It's not that necessary. Does it help? Yeah, but again, the only way to summon this is through Metal Reflect Slime, which is a trap card, and you're playing an OTK deck. So, you kind of see how that conflicts? You can't summon this if you're going first, or even second most of the time. So, like, playing multiples just seems kind of silly. But it is good as a one-of, obviously. It's still an insane card. It does treat itself as 3 tributes, which helps get out a Egyptian God easily. But outside of that, it really doesn't serve much of another purpose. It is funny to note, though, that Egyptian God Slime under Mound of the Bound is really damn hard to deal with, because not only can he not be targeted or destroyed by card effects, but he can't be killed in battle either, so good luck getting that off the field. Then we are on the 1 PSY-Frame Omega, since we're playing the PSY-Frame Gamma package. Synchro into Omega when you Gamma your opponent on your turn, and rip a card out of their hand. It's really nice, just ripping cards for free, and it removes itself off the board to ensure the network can resolve since you have to control no monsters. So just 1 copy of Omega. Then we are on the 1 number 1, 1 number 2, 1 number 3, and 1 number 4. But actually it's 2 number 1s, 2 number 2s, 2 number 3, 2 number 4. So this is your entire Numeron package. This is pretty straightforward. They all have the exact same effect. They can't be destroyed by battle. And at the end of the damage step, if they battled an opponent's monster, they can detach 1 material. Keep in mind, Network allows them to use the effect without detaching, and all their attack is doubled. Rinse, repeat. That's how you OTK. So when the first one attacks, they don't get destroyed. They activate the effect. All the rest of them get doubled. So now they jump to 2k. This one attacks. Again, same thing. No, they can't be destroyed in battle, but his effect triggers, they all double. So now they went from 2,000 to 4,000. This one attacks. Again, same thing. The attack gets doubled. Now this one's 8,000. And that's how you OTK. Keep in mind, they're all machines, so limiter removal is almost broken in this strategy. So that's pretty much your win condition right there. And then obviously, you do have access to link plays because you need to be able to make cards off of your Numeron. So we're on the 1 copy of Infinitrack Fortress Megaclops. This card is pretty much a big house, almost like a towers. It's just unaffected by monsters effects except Xyz. And it can't be destroyed by battle except by an Xyz monster. So it's really difficult for your opponent to deal with. Then we're on the 1 copy of Saryuja Scaldred, because again, we like to draw cards, fix our hand, put back bricks, put back things we don't need. So Sarita's really good at doing that. Then we're on the 1 Appaloosa, because it's just easy as hell to make off 4 Numerons, and you pretty much set up a 3200 beater or 4 negates. And then for the last card in the extra deck is 1 Mech Knight Crusadia Abramax. Abramax is absolutely broken in this deck. It's very easy to make just using all the Numeronic Seizes. Put an Abramax out and watch your opponent struggle to out it. So that's it for the main deck, guys. Or, I'm sorry, the extra deck. Let's go ahead and jump into the side deck briefly. We are playing the 1 Winged Dragon of Ra. We're playing this in the side deck, actually, because we are playing 3 copies of the Winged Dragon of Ra Sphere Mode. So again, this deck is designed to go second. If you're playing against a really sweaty field and Lava Golem can't do it, side in the Sphere Modes. Chances are that'll do it. So Sphere Modes are great. Just being able to tribute 3 of your opponent's monsters and slap a Sphere Mode on their board. And then when they can't use it as material for anything, it goes back to your side of the board on the next turn, and then you tribute it off to summon a Winged Dragon of Ra from deck or hand, ignoring conditions, kind of like a Lone Fire Blossom, which is nice. Then, again for the side deck, we are on 3 copies of Dark Hole. Nobody respects this card anymore. This card is still hilarious. It is not once per turn. And again, you didn't even care about nuking your own monsters because, again, you're playing Numerons. So on your turn, you usually want no monsters in your zone, so you can Numeron Network. Dark Hole just helps push for game, and you're playing 3 of it. And again, they're not even once per turn. So like, chances are you'll shotgun 1, it'll bait a negate, shotgun another, maybe bait another negate, which is fine anyway, because then it just helps make Network, ensure that it resolves. But 3 Dark Holes. Also keep in mind, because we're playing Mound of the Bound, if you have an Egyptian God on field and Mound of the Bound and you Dark Hole, the Egyptian God won't be killed, because Mound of the Bound protects from card effect destructions, even if they're your own. So 3 copies of Dark Hole are where it's at. Then we're on 2 copies of Lost Wind. Just a really, really good trap card to help negate monsters effects, and the fact that it recycles itself is really, really cool as well. So again, this deck can go first, and if we are forced to, we do have things that we can side into that will make it a living nightmare for your opponent. Things like Lost Wind are one of them. Then, because we hate back row, we are on 3 copies of Heavy Stormduster in the side. Now, the reason why I'm siding this specifically is for the simple fact that we play a lot of spells in this deck. Obviously, Sky Striker is meta relevant, which means that a lot of the decks are siding into, Imperial Orders and anti-spell fragrances, which hurt this deck tremendously. So that's when the Heavy Stormdusters get sided in. And nah, we're not dealing with Floodgates, we're not dealing with Imperial Orders. Get that shit out of here. Heavy Stormduster's here to address all that. And then for the last card on the side, we are on 3 copies of Solemn Judgment. Just tell your opponent no. Whatever the hell they're gonna do, no. If they're gonna summon something, no. They're gonna activate a spell trap, no. Just no. Just stop. So that's it for the side. Like I said, we do have options for going first as well as going second. But let me know what you guys think of the profile. We are actually going to be setting up a live duel between this deck and my FA Metaphors deck coming up pretty soon on the channel. So stay tuned for that. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments below. But yeah, hopefully you guys like the deck profile. Like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you soon once we get ready for that live duel. Have a good night.